One of the most popular videos on my channel this year is about UK house extension costs. I made that video in January 2022 and it almost immediately got criticism. It can't cost that much! You're being ripped off! My mate built one for half that price. Then Russia invaded Ukraine, inflation shot up and the critics went silent. If anything, the costs in that video are now too low. We have lived through an exceptional period of inflation this year and I want to make a follow-up video. If you're new to the channel, my name is Neil and I'm a real-life architect in the UK. I've run my own practice since 2009, specialising in altering and extending private homes. Back when I made my original house extension cost video, I had been working non-stop since lockdown ended and was dealing with chronic supply chain issues and rapidly increasing costs. The construction industry is one of the first places to experience inflation. We saw this coming well before most people in the UK. I made that video in January 2022 because I thought the supply chain issues and inflation issues were coming to an end. Obviously I was wrong and my crystal ball clearly needs a software update. Does this thing have Bluetooth? So why am I making a video in October 2022 about house extension costs in 2023? Well, two reasons. It takes a long time to plan any construction project, so I want people who are thinking about extending their homes to have realistic information now. This video will give you some real-world costs and help you to plan your project. The second reason I am making this video now is to beat the competition, and as Jeremy Irons once said,
"It sure is a hell of a lot easier to just be first."
I want my videos to give you guys the best information possible, get views and grow the channel. If it turns out that my crystal ball is wrong again, and if construction costs change significantly in 2023, I will make another follow-up video. Maybe you should subscribe to the channel, either way, to see if these costs hold true, or to get the update when I post it. Now, down to business. In the first video, I used a project which involved a significant amount of internal alterations to an existing house. In this one, I will try to simplify as far as possible. I'm going to use a house extension project which involved very little work inside the existing house. I want to give simple square meter rates which you can apply to your house extension project in 2023. If you are planning a substantial internal alteration to an existing property, square meter rates don't work. The only way to accurately price an internal alteration project is to itemize all the individual elements and price each one. It's a much more difficult process. I'm going to use this house extension project as an example. I haven't featured this job on my channel before because it was built back in 2012, 10 years ago. I will set out what this would cost to build today, assuming basic interior fittings and finishes, to keep the overall cost as low as possible. And I will also share what it originally cost to build. So if you want to see how much construction costs have inflated over a decade, watch to the end of the video. I also assume that you will hire a small to medium-sized building firm to carry out the work. I will explain why that matters to the costs later on. This house extension is typical of the kind of project I work on. It's an L-shaped wraparound extension to a mid-20th century semi-detached house. The only change we made to the existing building was to cut down part of the rear wall and incorporate the kitchen into the new open-plan space. I will look at the entire cost for doing this, but I will also separate the kitchen and demolition work out and give a square meter rate for the new structure to make your calculations as simple as possible. I broke the work down into two sections, builder work costs and supply costs. I've put a link to this document in the description. The builder work costs itemize the main element of the building and show the cost to fit things like radiators, tiles, and the kitchen. The supply costs are self-explanatory. This lists the purchase price of things like the radiators, tiles, and kitchen units. For simplicity's sake, I have not costed the supply of materials such as concrete, brick, timber, and insulation. These are included in the various elements in the builder work section. Under the total for builder work, there is a section called preliminaries. This is the cost of things needed to build the project, but which do not remain in the finished project. Things like insurance, management cost, skip hire, and scaffolding. The going rate is anything between 5 and 15%, with bigger firms charging more. I've put this at 7%. Below the supply cost total, there is a section called handling charges. This is what it will cost you to have the builder order specific items on your behalf. I've seen these vary from single figures up to 20% in some cases, but 10% is not unusual. Now, I can imagine some people feeling triggered by this information, so please don't have a go at me in the comments. I don't want to hear about how your mate Bob from down the pub built an extension and didn't incur these costs. The purpose of this video is to show the average homeowner in the UK how the average building firm in the UK operates, so that they understand how the system works. I didn't create that system, this is just the world we live in. Your mate Bob from down the pub might have got a great deal, but that isn't something the average UK homeowner can replicate, while hiring a building contractor is. If you want to avoid preliminaries altogether, you would have to become the contractor yourself, ordering materials, hiring staff, and arranging the sequence of work, which is not something I advise unless you have years of construction experience behind you and a network of mates in the trade to call on when you need help. It is more realistic to reduce handling charges by ordering things like the kitchen units, glazing, flooring, and tiles yourself. If you think about this from the contractor's perspective, a handling charge makes a lot of sense. Take tiles, for example. The contractor has to measure the area of wall and floor accurately, allow for any wastage because tiles never line exactly with corners or junctions. They have to work out the quantity of grout, sealant, and beading as well. Then they need to order all this, arrange delivery, store it safely on site, check it all to make sure the right stuff has been delivered and nothing is broken or missing. If something is broken or missing, the contractor has to go back to the supplier and arrange a replacement. All this takes time, and that time has to be paid for, and it's not cheap. Likewise with preliminaries. Typically, smaller firms charge lower preliminaries, but smaller firms usually take longer to carry out the work. I've recently been working with a larger building contractor. They have an office with staff, a workshop where they make doors, windows and stairs. They have full-time project managers and several experienced foremen. If anyone is sick or on holiday, they can always provide a replacement, and any variation to the project is priced rapidly by a full-time estimator in the office, so you know the cost before the work is carried out. All this costs money, and that firm's preliminaries are much higher than small building firms, typically 15% or more. So now we have an overall figure for the project of £136,839 plus VAT. It is common practice for UK contractors to list prices exclusive of VAT. There are lots of reasons for this, but the main one is that the Chancellor can announce changes to VAT with no notice, so keeping prices exclusive of VAT is best when planning something months in advance, like a house extension. If we took the kitchen out of this, the extension alone would cost about £2,750 plus VAT per square metre. Keep in mind this is using reasonably cheap fixtures and fittings. If we upped the spec to include underfloor heating, aluminium frame glazing, more electric fittings, porcelain tiles and hardwood flooring, the cost per square metre would get up to about £4,000 per square metre plus VAT. Increasing the spec of items like kitchen units and tiles would also increase their fitting price, as they usually require more expensive tools and more time to install. I always advise my clients to keep an additional sum of money aside. This is known as a contingency fund and would be used to pay for any unforeseen items or extras. I usually suggest this sum should be 10% of the construction budget, but it definitely shouldn't be any less than 5%. So in this case, the client should keep at least £7,000 spare, just in case. The good news is that the things which lead to the contingency fund being spent are often found in the first month on site, typically when the contractor starts demolitions and excavating. Things like unexpected drains, cracked foundations, lead pipes, defective electrics, and rotten timbers can all require extra money to be spent to put them right. The good news is that if the contingency fund doesn't need to be spent, you can either keep it or use it to buy better quality fixtures or finishes later on. Now, I said at the start of the video that I would show how much this project originally cost. Back in 2012, this job cost £85,000 plus VAT. Over the past 10 years, the cost of this extension has risen 61%, and the vast bulk of that inflation has been over the past 2 years. Now might be a good time to point out that I offer online consultations via the reallifearchitect.co.uk website. If you're thinking about altering or extending a house in the UK and want to know all the problem areas and opportunities before you start, get in touch. I put a link in the description below. As I said at the beginning, if you are planning a house extension, this video should give you some realistic information to base your plans on. I will make another video in 2023 if inflation continues to increase. Will inflation continue to increase? What will the interest rate be next week? Will Liz Truss still be Prime Minister at Christmas?